Please be seated. Imagine if, when you die, the only way to get into heaven was to pass a theology exam. I mean, that would be great for some of you who are a bit older because you've got all the answers, haven't you? But for us younger people, it'd be a bit tougher. But imagine if that was the case, you had to pass a theology exam. How many people would prefer this method simply than, say, having your name written down in a book, like the Book of Life? You know, each week in churches throughout the world, each week in many churches, people affirm their faith in Christ or God. Their theology. We affirm this. It's an important aspect of our religion. After my sermon, we're all going to stand and say some words, aren't we? Well, some of us will, most of us will. And one has to believe in order to have faith, don't they? And it takes faith to believe in God, doesn't it? But if we went around the world today, if it was Sunday morning around the whole world, would we all agree in what we believe in as Christians? Or even if we went around this cathedral this morning, just a small group of us, would we all believe exactly the same thing? Or would some people say certain things are more important than others? And then we would start to box people, categorise them as to, well, they are liberal. Those guys there, they're conservative. Well, we're orthodox. Those guys over there are loony. Don't know how many loonies we've got here. Only the assistant priest, really, I think. But have you asked yourself what you believe in? And not in general, broad terms, but in very specific details. What do you believe in about your faith? Or more importantly, how does your faith impact your life? In our gospel reading this morning, we have a fairly well-known story of Jesus cleansing the temple. Now, this account wasn't just put in there for no reason. John put it in there for a specific reason. But what was the reason, we could ask? Was it because people were disrespecting temple worship? They were making economic gain from religious rites? Or perhaps we could say that Jesus was against animal abuse. Perhaps. Or the sacrifices that people were bringing were more about convenience. Oh, we'll pick up an animal once we get there. We don't have to bring our own. Rather than true sacrifice. I mean, there are many ways we could interpret John's account. But perhaps when we look over all the message of John, the impression we get is that John is trying to help us believe in Jesus, who Jesus is, and importantly, what Jesus means for us, the reader. At the end of John chapter 2, we see that many people believed in Jesus because they saw the signs that he was doing. But what were the signs that he was doing at that time? And what were they actually believing in? And these two questions are irrelevant today as they were in Jesus' time. What were the signs that Jesus was doing? And what were people believing in? What does it mean to believe in Jesus? It's a fundamental aspect of our faith. It's a huge aspect of our faith because faith is believing. But believing what? We profess our faith every Sunday. But what does this faith, this belief mean for us? Are they just words? Or are they something far more? You know, when we read through the Gospels, the disciples' faith was wrong time and time again. They got it wrong. It's so encouraging because Jesus didn't kick them away. He corrected them time and time again. And the Gospel of John begins with this beautiful passage in John 1 describing the Word coming into the world, defeating darkness and offering adoption for everyone who believes. And after John chapter 2 and John 3 and John 4, we have two rather long discourses with a Pharisee, a religious leader named Nicodemus, and with a Samaritan woman, an outcast. Two very contrasting characters, but both discussing two important issues regarding Jesus' signs. And it could be summed up with this question: who is Jesus for you? Or perhaps more importantly, what does Jesus mean for you? Because for Nicodemus, it meant being born again. For the woman by the well, it meant living water. And they're concepts that perhaps we've heard today. But in Jesus' time, they were quite new. Because Jesus was bringing the Messiah in a way that really no one understood until after his ascension. That's why the disciples just couldn't get it. Jesus was trying to show people what a relationship with God was like. It was vital, inspiring. It was life-changing. That's what a relationship with God was meant to be. It was not meant to be ritualistic or man-made or a poor substitute which it had become. Indeed, Jesus was trying to show people what a real relationship with God truly looked like. But then again, we need to remember that God had a relationship with Israel for centuries. And God wanted to show people the way to live this full life, this short life that we have. And for Israel, it began with the Ten Commandments. You know, the Ten Commandments have a funny relationship in the church today. The Old Testament, it's old, it's no longer relevant. Many people don't really know what the Ten Commandments are. When you ask them, they say things like, "Thou shalt not," something, something, something. That's all they remember, "Thou shalt not," which obviously puts people off because it comes across as negative, restrictive. And for some people today, the idea of the Christian faith is seen as negative and restrictive. All the things you're not allowed to do. And perhaps it's why so many people aren't interested in our faith. Because they think of all the fun things they can't do. And the boring things that perhaps they need to do. Like come to church and listen to a sermon by the assistant priest. That's carrying your cross, isn't it? And even faithful Christians tend to have this concept of being careful not to do the things that we shouldn't do. We're hampered not to do things because we could do something wrong. And that could be a problem, especially if we like it. Jesus had run-ins with people all the time because he did things he shouldn't have done. He healed on the Sabbath. He ate with sinners. He didn't wash his hands ceremonially before eating. He talked with foreign women, and so on. So what did the Ten Commandments say not to do? Well, it talked about things like, don't worship false gods. Don't murder. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't covet. So is there anything there that you'd really like to do? Hands up, anyone? A little bit of a lie? Steal? Maybe more biscuits at morning tea time than you needed to? That sort of thing. Things that would really improve your life? Anything there? The biggest fallacy Christianity seems to struggle with in our society is that society today doesn't see our faith as appealing. It isn't enjoyable as doing other things, especially on a Sunday morning. I mean, it would be much nicer to have a nice leisurely brunch and read the Sunday morning paper, wouldn't it? Than come to church. Or maybe on a nice sunny day go for a walk along the beach. That'd be lovely. Don't agree. No. Or perhaps have a sleep in, wash the car. Now I know that faith is far more than church services, but the uniqueness of gathering together to worship God, it should be a highlight of our week, of our faith. That's what it should be. But for some people, it's a real effort to get here. And for some people, if they have nothing to complain about the Sunday morning service, then they feel cheated. They've done something wrong somewhere. Sometimes we tick it off as our Sunday morning to-do list. Done church, right, now we can get on with the day. Sometimes I have even heard that some people base, I don't know if it's true or not, but some people base the worth of the service on a Sunday morning on the music, over against everything else. Imagine that. If the music isn't right, then the worship's not right. And what we do, we actually miss out on what worshipping God is truly about. We are communing with God, the creator of the universe, this God who holds the world in the palm of his hand. So like it's the whole world and he's there. This is who we're worshipping. Sort of puts some of the things we complain about into perspective, doesn't it? Is it little wonder society sees little benefit or appeal in seeking out what this faith is about, when sometimes we almost feel tongue-tied trying to explain the goodness of our faith without using church jargony words? In some cases we say, well, the real benefit is when you die, which is, a bit short-sighted in some ways, or maybe too long-sighted. So you just got to suck it up until you die, then the benefits will kick in. But the reality is that we were created for this world. Our life that we live is here now. And the reason that God brought the Ten Commandments was to help Israel live in this world now in a way that brings true life and goodness. And Israel was meant to be an example to other nations to show them that living this way was the best way to live. And in exactly the same way, Jesus came so that God's will would be done on earth. That living the way that Jesus taught us would be the best way to live this life, this short life that we have. And that we would be an example to other people to show them through our life what this life is like. How the right priorities can make a huge difference in our life. How things like the fruit of the Spirit, things like forgiveness, graciousness, can fill our lives with goodness. Not judgment or condemnation, bickering, gossip. We live in such a way that it can't help but attract people to what we have because they want what we've got. And what we have is what God has given us. And yet I think that the church, just like Israel, that sometimes we give a hard time because we go, how stupid is Israel? Sometimes the church is exactly the same as Israel. We want to have our feet in both camps. Sometimes, when we're honest, when no one's looking, we actually like some of the worldly pleasures. We like money. In fact, we like it so much that we're prepared to keep more than we need instead of giving it to those who need it. Because we think that will keep us happy, give us the things we want. That's what we do. There are times when we're selfish, or we're greedy, or we're angry because things don't go our way, or we give in to pleasures that aren't good. And all of this is based on what we believe. What we believe will make us happy, give us satisfaction. Will spending or keeping all our money make us more happier than giving it to those in need? Will pushing ourselves in front of others to get the best piece of cake or morning tea after church make us happier than being at the back of the line than waiting? How different will we be from those who don't believe? And that's why our belief is so important. And John's Gospel describes and expands what believing in Jesus truly means for us. And yet the only way we can realise this is by living it. We can't actually sit on the sidelines and judge it. We've got to be in the game. Because it's not about what we think. It's about how we live. Living the way that Christ taught us. And the reality, the truth, the importance, the sacredness of our faith is only found through living it. Otherwise we rob ourselves. We rob ourselves of all the goodness that God wants to put into our life. We rob others of all the goodness that we can give to others. So belief dictates the way that we live in our priorities, our attitudes, our faith. And importantly, it will dictate what others see in us. Whether we are uptight, legalistic killjoys, or laid-back, unrestricted airheads. or living as children of God, full of truth, joy, peace and love, because that's what God offers us. Our belief is so important that John dedicated his whole gospel to it. And so this morning I want to leave you with two questions. What do you believe? And how do you live? What do you believe? And how do you live? It's a question I ask myself just as much as you. Amen.